No, it's like I've arrived at this place I was trying to get and I didn't realize I was there already. And now I'm kind of going, oh, I think I'm going to enjoy this for a while. You know, instead of being buried under work all the time.
And now we're starting.
You're in the process of becoming where you know you're going, and then you realize I'm already there.
Yeah. Yeah. As far as what my goals have been,
Yeah.
you know, basically to be super involved in meaningful work that I'm proud of, and getting some, you know, people actually acknowledging it,
Even better.
people that I respect, and now making some time to enjoy some of the perks of having gotten there. You know, like you know, traveling a little more, going to festivals, being invited to do really fun things, and I love teaching too. So I do workshops and.
So I was going to ask you about the teaching. You're an advisor at the lab.
Yes.
So how does that work out? We talked to Peter as well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about your upbringing? You know,
How I got
Yeah.
to be a composer?
walk us through how.
It's kind of a long
you're kind of
story.
born that way, right?
No, not at all. I'll try to give you a nutshell. I come from a really musical family, but not ever encouraged professionally. You know, music lessons when you're a kid, but not with the idea that you're going to someday be a
Make a buck.
musician. Yeah, I mean, it was always part of my life, and actually, music for me was where I really was able to express myself. And you know, when you're an angsty teenager and all that, you know, I went through all the phases: the folk singer, the ethnic musician, you know, playing for folk dance, you know, folk dancers, and then I got to college and I thought, oh, I guess I'll major in music. I took my first theory class and I absolutely hated it.
Where was that? Which college?
UCLA. No offense, UCLA, but I wasn't ready. So I transferred over to anthropology, which actually turned out to be a really great fit. I loved it because I had a wanderlust. I wanted to learn about the world. And ethnic music, I love, and I've played lots of. So I played in ethnic ensembles in college, actually with Steve Bartek.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's where we became friends. And
So world music.
yeah, love world music. Before it became known as world music, it was called ethnic music. And so, you know, I took lots of classes in that, but I studied anthropology, and then I went to grad school in anthropology. But while I was in college, I became an activist. And this all is going to make sense when I get to the end. I was really becoming very interested in social action, and social justice, and legal things, and prisoners' rights, and women's rights. And as I got more and more into being an activist, school felt irrelevant. You know, it was more like I was having fun and I enjoyed learning.
You were doing rather than
Yeah, I wanted to go out in the world. I was always wanting to be out in the world and doing something. So I did.
like you're most of yourself in the field.
Yeah. So I went out and I immediately got a job working with these public interest lawyers. And I did a lot of great white-collar crime investigations, and we broke the story on forced sterilization in Los Angeles. We did some prisoner stuff, and I was like really happy. But meanwhile, I was also still performing in bands and stuff, like on the side. I was in the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo, and I was also in my own band, which was an all-woman band, feminist band, called Alice Stone. And I was playing all the time, but by day I was like this hardcore legal researcher, running around community organizing, and I did that for about 3 years.
Balancing it too.
Yeah, and I was in like 3 bands. You know, when you're young,
Of course, you have the
and
energy.
robust.
Yes, exactly.
So one day I woke up. Oh, I was also a songwriter. I was writing songs for my band and performing them, and I did a lot of satire songs and political activist songs. You know, with titles like "Why Not Take It Out on the Children," you know, things like "I'd Love to See You, but There's No Time," "White Girls Blues." So
Monty Python.
yeah, very. Oh, we used to watch them all.
Ministry of Silly Walks.
Yes, absolutely.
It's the best.
So one day I just woke up and it was kind of like I didn't want to go to my job. You know, I loved my job, but I just wanted to play music. And I realized that I've always been that way. When I've kind of done with something, I'm ready to move forward in the next phase. You know? And so I kind of realized I was ready for something else, and I wanted to do music all the time. So that's when my music career started. And I played in the bands for about 3, you know, I went on like that for a few years. And eventually I left the Oingo Boingo because they became kind of a punk band, and I didn't want to do that. And my I left Alice Stone because they didn't want to be as professional as I wanted to be.
I remember I saw a couple of UCLA when I was there in '82.
That was way after me.
Yeah.
I left in about 78. It was fun though while it lasted. You know, because we were wearing gorilla suits and running around like maniacs playing jazz, and it was so much fun. But I got very serious about being a better musician because those guys were so good. And anyway, so that was really fabulous. But I was done with it, and so then I tried my own band. And I was doing, you know, a lot of gigs and getting recognized, but I couldn't make a living. So that's when I got a job at a singing telegram company.
Right, why not?
You know, yeah, why not? And I started as a person that you would call, and I'd sing the songs on the phone, and you know, sell them. And then I started making up acts, and you know, what was supposed to be a $75 thing, I would sell these acts for $400, $500, because I'd invent, you know, like Tarzan and the Ape Man, or a stripping meter maid. So then my boss went, oh, and so we had this whole division started. This is too much detail.
No, this is fantastic. You know, 'cause this informs your craft.
Yeah. It's so funny because my whole thing has been such a mix of wild comedy and satire, and then really serious political devotion, you know, to change. And that's how I ended up. Okay, so I did that, and then we started our own division. I wrote all these musicals and did all this stuff. It was so fantastic. And then I left, and then I started a swing band at a restaurant, and that took off and became 4 nights a week gig. So I stopped doing the other stuff. And then I started booking the jazz club, and it became like a really incredible LA big-time jazz club. The first person I booked was Etta James and Mose Allison, and then we had all the greats. They were still alive. Yeah, so I've always been a big jazz fan. I got to, you know, I mean, I could run, I mean, anyone that matters, Nina Simone, Etta James, you know, I mean, Bertha Kitt.
They all came through.
Everybody came through, George Shearing, Phil Woods. I mean, just name it, they all came through the club. So then we got a record deal with Polygram, and this was at the very beginning of digital. It was like 2 giant 1-inch video cassettes. No, this is before CDs.
Yeah.
We're talking about recording on these 1-inch videos. So Tower Records was right up the street. They brought down 2 of these giant machines and put them in the back, and we recorded Joe Williams, Nina Simone, Marlena Shaw, and Shirley.
You did the documentary on their way.
No, we're talking about albums, live albums.
Yes, but you did a picture, a documentary on Joe Waits, no?
No,
Nothing on Joe
I wish. That would be fun, actually.
He's fantastic.
He's a very interesting guy. I worked with him. I did 2 albums with him. So anyway.
So Tower Records.
Yeah. So we did those albums, and then soon after, someone gave me something to score. Oh, I had a swing band for years. That was a working band. It started out as a really exciting club original band. Then we ended up being a working band playing weddings and stuff, which was to me
General business.
Yeah, I wanted to be more artistic, and but it
Pays the bills.
it paid, and it was really fun too. I had a great band, and that allowed me to build my studio while I was writing songs. Got some songs in movies, and then at a certain point, someone came up and said, "Would you put music to my film?" That was like,
That's when it started. Right?
yeah, that's when we're talking about before there was synchronization. Home studios were pretty primitive. And so I was always really on the bottom floor. I mean, I had my first sequencer when it was a 1-track Roland bass sequencer.
Back in the Moog days.
Yep. Then I had a Commodore with 8 tracks. And then I got my first little Mac with Performer, you know, and it had like you could have 200 tracks or something. It was a little box, and I mean I had the synths and everything, but everything was synchronized separately. You know, you got to start the video, then you got to start the tape.
It wasn't networked yet.
No, nothing like
Before Pro
that.
Tools.
We used the Knudsen book. Somebody posted it on Facebook the other day, where you have the measures, and it's a calculator basically for how you can hit a timing.
Yes.
It's really complicated, and it was too much like math for me.
This is good because, you know, Film Music Magazine is a trade magazine, so it's less about the lifestyle, it's more about the gear and the process.
We can go. I'm a gear geek,
Yeah.
but I'm not a technologically. It doesn't come naturally. I had to really learn, and the desire was very strong because with all this technology came independence.
Yes, absolutely.
And a level playing field. So I never thought of scoring movies because it was like you had to go to school in a conservatory and walk around and do all this, and I had sort of already rejected theory.
Berkeley College and all that.
I have to say though, while I was in the Boingo, I got very inspired, and I did go back to school. I went to Santa Monica City College.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and I studied
CRW.
theory. I studied theory, and I learned a bunch of stuff and orchestration a little bit. And I also went to Dick Grove and tried to learn to play better. So I was really into it and practiced all the time. But once I put music to picture, I just knew that it was like an addiction.
Yes. You lived and breathed it. It was like
It was so satisfying because being a songwriter was getting boring. I was tired of my own words. I really just wanted to do music, and I'm a good songwriter, but it just wasn't satisfying to me anymore because I was getting sick of myself. So then I decided, this is for me. And then I started pursuing it, and a friend of mine was doing these really horrible low-budget movies, and at the time, I was also doing a lot of corporate videos. There's a lot of work in those videos that you could actually earn a living while you were learning.
corporate companies advertising.
Yeah, for their internal. It wasn't like ads that you could go on TV or something.
That's right.
Like they'd have these big, expensive industrials, and like you get this great money to create all this music. So it was really a great time for me in terms of my learning. I was able to develop my chops in the studio and buy more gear and kind of get myself ready. And then when I got into this low-budget film thing, it was like I did about 10 or 12 films, just boom, 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 boom. The funny part is the producer never wanted me to talk to the directors. And so I just was scoring them on my own, and they were really terrible. And I started to realize, okay, this can't be all there is. I mean, if this is what it is, I can't do this. And that's when, in 1997, I did a couple of small docs, but then I met Arthur Dawn, who's a very revered documentary filmmaker. And I met him at a screening of one of my other films, and he was telling me about this film that he was working on. It was called License to Kill, and it was about, he went to prison to interview he interviewed men who thought it was okay to murder gay men.
Oh wow.
And it was a chilling, talk about a horror.
It's haunting.
Yeah, really haunting. And so when I worked on that film, we came to Sundance. That was 1997, and he won 2 awards. It was a turning point in my life because I looked around and I went, oh my God.
It's a whole world.
Yeah, and it was really the documentary filmmakers that I was just like.
That was before documentary took off.
It was kind of a little earlier, yeah. But I realized it really. See, this is where it all came together for me. Now I'm going to be able to do what I'm good at and love, which is music, and work on things that actually have a lot to do with changing.
I was going to say that's the full circle because you're
For me, that's where I was kind of
you're
going.
an activist and also you're a creative expression.
And many of the films I've worked on, I'm very proud of them and the things that have happened because of that they've caused change to happen, and they've been so that's where we are today. Like I went forward and I made that my goal to work in documentaries and get well known and be able to work on really great stuff.
You want to say a little bit about it was Forbidden Art, right?
Oh, Desert of Forbidden Art?
Right.
Oh, I love that.
That story. Yeah.
Oh man, well, I know so many filmmakers now, and I'm also, just from being in it so long, and so people call me with these amazing projects. Do you want me to tell you the story
What a joy!
of the film?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Oh, the film is amazing.
Yes.
The story is there was a guy. Okay, so when Stalin was in power in Russia, before he came into power, there was this huge art movement there going on. It was kind of like what was going on in Europe.
Bolsheviks.
Well, before that, it was like there was these incredible artists doing this really free, free art. It was abstract.
And they were allowed to.
Yes. Well, when Stalin came in, all that was allowed was state-sanctioned art. So a lot of those artists were killed, sent to the gulag. They hid their art. Some of it was destroyed. Some of them were they were forced to work on art that was state-sponsored and go insane.
Yeah.
So the film. So fast forward, I guess it was. I don't exactly have the time frame in my head about when there was this guy named Savitsky who was born into the upper class, but just he was a very small child when the revolution happened, so he was out on the street, and he wanted to be an artist. So he grew up, and he never really was a good artist. But what he discovered was this art. He came across this art. He started as an archaeological kind of person. He was down in Uzbekistan, and he was an artist at archaeological digs, and he got very into the local indigenous culture and all the art. But I don't remember how he discovered some of this abstract art, but he came across it, and he became obsessed with saving it. So he managed to track down the children of these artists, and all over the place. And there were places where it was stockpiled, hidden away.
I was going to say, how do you locate it and centralize
I can't remember. I mean, I'd have to refresh myself. It's a
story in a story.
It's a story in a story. This guy was amazing. He collected and saved 40,000 pieces of art.
Wow.
And then he did something truly remarkable. He had been down in Uzbekistan, which was the outlying regions of the Soviet Union. Some of these, I know how he came across it. Some of these artists had migrated down to Uzbekistan because it was very exotic. And they were living there kind of like bohemians and getting into the local culture, and
Like
some of them became Muslim.
19th century Paris. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Very much like that. And it was kind of this burgeoning hotspot of art. And so he came across some of this abstract art that is truly remarkable.
That's like an archaeological find.
It was a contemporary archaeological find, yeah. So then when he made it his life's work. So he had this archaeology museum, and what he did was he was very, very clever. He collected all this art and he brought it down, and in those days it was very hard to travel. I mean, and he also had to gain the trust of people to give him the art.
Sure.
And so he took it all down to this museum. Now this was all art that was forbidden.
Yes. Right.
It wasn't allowed
Not
to be.
state sponsored.
Yeah, it wasn't state sponsored. So he ended up having it there, and displaying it.
At the risk of his life.
Well, it was very risky.
Yeah.
And then, but he was so far off the grid that they didn't really realize, and they kind of left him alone. But it was very risky when he was traveling with the art and stuff. So he ended up collecting these 40,000 pieces, and they're all down there. So then there's the art is there, but no one really knows about it.
I was going to say, how do you get the word out without the state finding it?
So what happened was, then he got very sick because part of the restoration used this really toxic chemical and he got very sick from it. And he died, but he was pretty, he was like in his 60s, I guess, or maybe 70s. And he died, and he had a protege who stayed there and kept going. She was actually Uzbeki, and there's so many twists in the story, but I'll try to get to the point. So then, flash forward to, it had to be the 90s, I would think. A New York Times art critic. He's traveling around Uzbekistan. He's just traveling around.
Of all places.
Yeah, I don't know if he heard about the museum or what. So he goes there and he writes this big, huge piece in the New York Times about this art. And all of a sudden it explodes because the New York art scene, everybody knows about this art now. So it's a really complicated thing because that art is actually, now that Uzbekistan is its own country, it's a Muslim country, and they still don't really like this art. And the art is always in danger. They don't have proper atmospheric conditions for it. They have most of it they haven't been able to restore it because they don't have the funds or the people. And so there's all these really, it's a very suspenseful situation for the art. And then there were all these collectors started flying in, trying to grab it. She's trying to protect the collection.
It's like a thriller.
It is. It's really a great story. So anyway, the story is fantastic.
So what was your way into enhancing the atmosphere with music?
Oh, well, it was really fun because, first of all, when I first saw the film, it was very, a lot of talking heads, a lot of people talking in another language, really strange-looking characters because toothless and stuff,
yes, right.
and
you were one
lots
of the ones with all your teeth.
Yeah, I was one of them, yes. And then there was a lot of archival footage, so in a situation like that, you have a story being told, and if, it can really be choppy for the audience if you don't find a way. So I decided that I was going to really tell the story of the emotional story of the artists, like the longing to be free, the longing to express themselves, and to create a sort of this texture of emotional, like where the audience could feel, could feel emotional about not just the story of the work, but the story of the people that this stuff happened to.
Just living day to day in that environment.
Yeah, and how painful it was for them.
Sure.
Not like the ones that could survive had to completely not do their art. I mean, they weren't allowed to do it, and if they resisted, they were really either killed or sent to the gulag. A lot of them became alcoholics. So
because they weren't allowed to express what their craft was.
Yeah, can you imagine?
Right. It's like chopping off an arm.
Oh yeah. So that was, to me, was like all the rest was already there. What we needed was something to pull it all together to help the audience follow the through line. So there were themes, that were the cinematic themes, and then there was places where I would incorporate ethnic instruments, because I love doing ethnic music and I like to study. I don't try to do, in regions of the world, it'd be like, you have to become an expert to not make mistakes about putting the wrong music.
Because they know.
Like I was talking to this guy that I met the other night, he's Iranian, and he said Argo really pissed him off because they were using Moroccan music in the scenes. And that was really like...
A lot of people were upset in that region. I have Persian friends in Los Angeles, and they were upset that Affleck played him.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Yes.
But I mean, so when I do ethnic stuff, I like to create like the vibe, but without getting so specific.
Yes.
So you want to capture, being a composer, you want to capture the right elements and promote them. You don't
Enhance them.
Yeah, you want to bring something to the fore, but it's really the story. It's not about, the music.
So did you have an idea of the instrumental through line?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Bring it together.
It has themes and stuff.
Right.
I'm very into that. I really think composition is very important. And I'm afraid that because of technology, sometimes we forget.
That's for sure.
It starts to sound like music way before it is because of loops and samples. Hey, that sounds good. But there's no composition.
Yes.
And that's my pet peeve about some scoring that's happening these days. I think people really... like I don't know if you saw it, I wrote an article for the IDA magazine because I'm experimenting with this idea and I wanted to put it out there to the filmmakers and also composers, about really coming from a place of story arc. And like filmmakers work in story structure,
Sure.
3 acts with a story arc and character arcs. And I felt like, well, we should have music be part of that. And there, and when you talk about the music for the film, to incorporate the music story arc as well. And there are places where it will go with the story arc, and there's places that will...
It tells its own story.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, but it should all be, specific and on purpose, not just happenstance.
And if composition is done right, do you feel that you could release a soundtrack independent of visual sync, and it would still be a story?
I feel like my scores, when I listen to them on a CD or something, I feel like they stand as music. And I think that I'm very proud of that, I mean, I don't know if everybody would agree with me, but I'm proud of that because it matters to me. And, it's kind of amazing, like there's this organic process that happens once you have a composition. I always say, just give me 4 notes. Just give me 4 notes and I've got a theme,
Name that tune for
Yeah, but then the idea is to vary it and to reorchestrate it, repurpose it.
Sure.
And then you introduce another theme as it's needed. It's really, that's to me the exciting part of music.
Last year we spoke with Mark Isham and we were talking about how we did River Runs Through It. He was, it was a marvelous stuff. But that was a lot of like layering and repetition and repurposing, circling back on the theme.
I don't think people realize how thoughtful composers are.
Yes.
We're very, it's like, you want me to write something in 5 minutes? Sure, I can make something that sounds like music. But I want to think about it, I want to absorb the film, and I want to absorb the filmmaker. And what is their vision?
Yes.
And I want to be telling the same story they're telling. We should both be together, and that makes it more powerful.
And some of the most striking scores are not noticeable when you're first seeing the film.
Yeah, you don't really. You should. I mean,
if you're doing your job, it just you don't really notice
it's
it.
just there. And then maybe at the end when we get to do our end credits.
Yes, right.
But what happens in docs a lot these days is they actually can keep cutting footage into the end credits, and so you're always underscoring. It's pretty funny. I remember when I did Ethel. I had this really big theme. It actually ended up working pretty well, but so we get to the end credits and I start, boom, I'm going, and then all of a sudden there's this whole scene, So I had to write.
That.
Yeah, so I underscored it, and it actually worked out really well. And what's funny is when you listen to it on separately from the picture, musically it's enjoyable. It goes down, it comes up, So
it stands on its own.
It stands on its own, and it's still musical, and it's still not interrupting the story. It's not interfering with what the filmmakers goal was.
What I'm struck by is your range of your interests prior to specializing in this, right? I mean, it's very eclectic and it's very diverse.
Yeah.
And so I wondered if you wanted to say a little bit about how it came to be to work with Terry Gilliam, because...
Well, I didn't work with him. I worked on a film about him.
Yeah, so his brain is just...
Oh, I love him.
Yeah, right?
He's like... That was very fun working on that film.
So that process of, I guess, finding out what they wanted, or did they allow you just to come with something?
No, we worked very hard. That's the thing. I always say, if you want to just write music, make records.
Yes.
If you want to be a film composer, you've got to learn to collaborate.
Sure.
And you actually, what I've learned over the years is to embrace the process.
Yes.
Because getting there, like if I just was put in a room to score a film, I could do it very quickly. But that wouldn't include anybody else's ideas.
collaboration, right?
Yeah, like you got the filmmakers, the editors, the sound guys may have ideas. All along the way, everybody has ideas, the producers. So what makes it fun is that it's stuff that I wouldn't have thought of on my own. And it's challenging, too, because sometimes they're asking me for, a lot of times I'm asked to do things I've never done.
Yes, that's even more fun.
It's way fun, it's really fun. And then I do my
Stretch the
research.
envelope.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always learning. I mean, I'm always learning.
Clearly,
And
you're passionate about. I don't know this. I'm going to find out.
Exactly. And the filmmakers, I admire them so much, and I really respect. Doc filmmakers are amazing.
For sure.
What they do, people have no idea how hard it is to get a doc made and how much dedication you need.
So extraordinary.
It's very extraordinary.
Just to get where you need to be to get the footage.
To get the money
Right.
together.
Yes.
I've known people that have financed their house.
Yes.
I've known people that have made humongous sacrifices. I've actually co-produced a film that it took 10 years to get it made. We got it made, but it took a while.
Yes.
Once we had money, it was fast.
Then it works. Right?
Yeah. But so it's it's not for the meek,
No, that's for sure.
but it's exciting.
The lab. Do you want to say a little bit about?
Sure.
So people come in, the newbies, the students, with all
They're
kinds
not
of.
actually newbies.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say, right?
Yeah.
Because they get selected because they have some track record. Right?
Well, it's interesting. I think that the lab, first of all, I have to say about Sundance Institute, it's like a dream for an artist. I mean, they are so supportive, and from the second you arrive, they treat you like an important artist. They support and nurture you and make you comfortable and make you feel at home and like what you want matters. And they want to encourage everyone to evolve, and become as much as they can.
It's like an inspiring vacuum. It's an incubator.
It's an incubator.
Yeah.
They give you everything you need, and they work your butt off.
I bet.
I mean, it's really intense. I mean, I can only say, I didn't do the last one where they moved to Skywalker, so I don't know how that. It's a little different than it has been. But in the past, what I've loved about it, they had the Composers Lab, and it went from the fiction through documentary. So the same people would be there for the whole experience, like about 3 weeks. And it was really hard work for the composers. First of all, you don't have your own gear. They set you up in a studio and you're working with stuff, and it's like you don't have your comfort zone at all. And secondly, you're working with these filmmakers in a very, very, everybody sees what you're doing.
Pressure
They can
cooker.
see your failures. They can see your
no wiggle room
victories.
for-
There's no wiggle room. There's no nonsense.
Yes.
But there's such a great environment of collaboration and camaraderie. So then I would come up after they'd already been there. The doc filmmakers would show up that were chosen for the documentary composer lab. Their film was in a certain place where they were ready to think about music, or they should be, or they wanted to. And so they would come in and they'd all be thinking, why am I at the Why am I at the composer's lab? I need an editor. I need story help. But what happened, it was so great. And the composers a lot of them weren't very familiar with documentary filmmakers. So for me, it was really fun. I mean, the first time I did it, I think it was 2003, I would say, because it was the year Born into Brothels, because they were in the lab. Anyway, you take these people and you put them, they're utterly foreign to each other. These composers who are thinking they're going to Hollywood, and these filmmakers who are like, couldn't care less about Hollywood.
Right, they're up in the east.
And they're like busy just, they're so deep,
Yes.
So, but what's really incredible is that when you have creative people and you put them together, they find out a way to work. Yeah, and so I would be there, and a filmmaker guide would be there. And together we would sort of just shepherd them.
Yes.
And little light bulbs would start going off, and I might, we were very involved. Like, a lot of composers would rather just be left, okay, I know what I have to do, just leave me alone, I will write. But that wasn't what it was about. It was about learning to collaborate.
That's really
and take input and incorporate their input in a productive way.
Well, you can really guide them and help them with that because you're like a Sherpa who's been through it.
I've definitely been through it, and I'm always still going through it.
Yes.
It's always challenging. It never, I always think, oh, this will be a much easier project. There's always something,
Of course.
So I think being a film composer is one of the most unique. So many skill sets. It's like ridiculous.
You have to be a writer, a filmmaker. You have to think visually.
Yeah, and a therapist,
Yes.
a psychologist, a business person, an organizer. You know, you have to produce the sessions. You know, you're like you have to be able to organize your team, or if you don't have a team, you have to do all of it yourself.
You are the team.
Yeah, I'm trying to move away from that because it's not fun. It takes the fun out of it. You know, so I'm always trying to figure out how to incorporate other people and get help.
It's like you're more of a parent than inspirer.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, the labs. So there's very intensive. I mean, so Kara Mertes was very intense, and she liked having things going all the time. So we would get up and we'd start at something like 8 or 9 in the morning and go till 11 or 12 at night. And you know, we'd have screenings and we'd have meetings, and then they'd have work time, and then we'd come back and we'd be visiting them during work time. Some people actually did their narration while they were there. I mean, it was really like intense.
So it's like
exciting.
It's like a workshop.
It's very much. Oh, that's what it is. A workshop with guidance. You know, and we were available to help them anytime they needed help. You know, sometimes some people were more embracing the process of learning from someone else. Some people didn't feel like they needed that as much. So it's sort of like everybody finds the resources are there, and everybody takes
Find their
from
own
it.
voice, their own way.
They find their own way and utilize the resources, you know, to satisfy their own needs. It's a pretty great, you know. So now they've incorporated Skywalker, which makes it much more
You have all that
technology.
gear, right?
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I haven't been yet, and I hope I get to go. And I think it'll be really interesting. Although I do feel like it's very important. The relationship between the filmmaker and the composer that's really my area of interest. I think that's where the great stuff happens, because the rest of it comes together, you know. But I mean, the filmmakers need to learn to appreciate and utilize all these resources like the technology, and expect more from the score, expect more from the sound, and know how to ask for it. So, you know, it's all good.
It is all good.
And let me just say, the Institute, when you're involved with them, they're very, I mean, it never stops. If you're an alum or a lab advisor,
You get emails.
well, I get a pat. I mean, it's like they're so supportive on a continuing basis. They want to create a community, and I think that's what they've done. And when you're around any of their activities, it's like, can I just stay here forever?
Yes. Do I have to leave?
I don't want to
Does it
leave.
end?
It's so wonderful.
Well, music is arguably an autonomous voice in and of its language
Yeah,
of its own. It's unifying the world. And the Institute, of course, is one of the world-class organizations, so it draws from the best of the best.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, it's sort of a United Nations.
It is, because we get people from all over the world. Like, there's a film here called Sepida that was at the lab the year before when I was there. And it's so exciting that she's here, you know. She's from Denmark, and she filmed in Afghanistan about a girl who wants to be an astronomer in Afghanistan.
You're not supposed to even study if you're a girl.
Yeah, I mean, it's like,
That's so inspiring.
so they do incorporate a lot of world stuff, too, in the lab, and it's very exciting on that level. I've seen some incredible stuff, you know, that they've helped develop over the years. They're very into developing voices.
Yes.
They're looking for the labs. They're looking for people who have a voice.
Have a voice, right?
Yeah.
And now they have exhibition platforms. So down in LA, they have the theater, the Sundance.
Well, they have that, and they're all the time. They have this thing, Film Forward now, that's going to other places.
In London. Right?
Yeah, and I think it's just building a global community, you know, of artists. So.
Well, we'll see you on Wednesday.
Oh, thank you.
Right.
Doreen does these amazing
She
panels
does.
with all these. Like last year, there
It was
were
like 47 people.
Yeah, and she managed to make it interesting,
She
didn't
does.
she?
Yeah.
I was amazed. So we have 20 this time, I think.
Wow.
And
The room keeps getting bigger. Right?
well, no, last year there was 29.
I remember.
I
that.
was like, I looked around, I went, wow.
Looked like a football team.
But I never felt like I got to talk. I mean, it was. She
Gives
did great.
everyone time.
Yeah, she's fantastic. She's very supportive as well. And
Yes,
I love
she
that
is.
BMI has been so involved in the labs and the festival and the institute.
It's a remarkable resource.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, so Miriam Cutler, Michael Rogers from Film Music Magazine at the Caledonian, 2014 Sundance. Au revoir.
Au revoir. See you around.